Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Dream with Dreaming Together for a Better Future Summit. I am so incredibly honored to welcome Julissa Collazo to our live stream this afternoon. Julissa is a first-year teacher at Nora Elementary School in Washington Township here in Indianapolis. She is a graduate of the Butler College of Education, where she was Student Teacher of the Year and a Top 100 student last year. She is what we are all talking about right now, the first-year teacher teaching in the middle of a worldwide pandemic and all of the things that go along with that, and agreed to be here with us today because she has an amazing story to tell, and I'm absolutely honored to be welcoming her today. So, Julissa, thank you so much for being here, and can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Courtney, and the Keep Indiana Learning team for inviting me to speak today. So yes, my name is Julissa Collazo, and today I'm going to be talking about student-centered learning, where our dreams see no limit, from the perspective of a first-year teacher. So here is a brief overview of some different points I want to hit on today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about me as a person and as an educator, about the realities that we're seeing in education today, the dreams from the perspective of a first-year teacher and some third graders, and then so what, some action steps moving forward. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Chicago and from a very proud Puerto Rican family. I went to Chicago public schools, kindergarten all the way through my senior year of high school, and then went to Butler University for my undergraduate degree, where I graduated this past May with a Bachelor of Science in Elementary Education. At Butler, a student taught for 2 semesters, one in a completely virtual first grade setting and another in a completely socially distanced fourth grade setting. And now I teach third grade in Washington Township here in Indianapolis. So about me as an educator, first and foremost, I believe that children are capable, creative, and inquirers. This is why we come into education, or at least the reason why I did, is because I believe that children are these things and will help to shape our future. I believe that teachers, especially during a pandemic, are listeners, responsive, and needed. And what I'm going to talk mostly about today in this presentation is that I believe that education should be collaborative, student-driven, and evolving. So I briefly want to touch on each of the photographs that I have on this slide. Thinking about the state that we are currently in right now, student needs are what should be on the very forefront of our minds. So this first picture here is from my classroom this year with my third graders, and we started a unit and students were given the opportunity to collect data in any way that they wanted to. So this is a student who chose to organize data through M&Ms by sorting in color. The second image here is from when I was a virtual first grade student teacher. The 3 images show the project that I did with the student. It was called the Tree Project. And so being behind computer screens and all day long, me and my cooperating teacher noticed that students were in desperate need for movement, to get outside, and to know more about the communities around them. And so we came up with this project together called the Tree Project, which ended in a building of an acorn village. And so the steps that we took were the students, this student here is modeling being a race car driver because his family is very involved in the Indy 500. And so modeling with his body becoming a race car driver, he was able to sketch out what natural materials he could turn himself into. And then the last photograph shows him as his acorn race driver. And so all students were able to make themselves and then come together as part of this acorn community to meet all of the needs of the students during this time. And very quickly, the last image is from a fourth grade classroom where I student taught in person during the height of the pandemic. So students were behind face shields, wearing face masks, sitting 3 to 6 feet apart at a time, but they were all so creative. I had such a creative group, very artistic group, and they all loved literature. So I listened to their needs and created a project for them called Walking in My Shoes. And so this is a photograph of them going on a museum walk of each other's work where they took examples and evidence from the books that they were reading to create sneakers using colors and symbols that the characters of their books would have worn, based on evidence, and they were able to get to know each other through this artistic side, as well, which was really, really cool. So first, I want to talk about the realities that we're seeing today in education, again, through the lens of a first-year teacher. So first, I'm going to talk about COVID and its impact. So we know that we have to be socially distant, which makes everything feel very isolated, especially when you're in third grade. And it's such a big year for you in school. So isolation, it's hard to build community and build relationships with other when we have this ongoing pandemic around, which has exposed the and this pandemic that we also have in the United States of inequity and injustice and racism as well. So all of that is tied into what we are seeing through COVID. The second thing is testing, which we all know puts a tremendous amount of pressure on students, but also on teachers. And then going into that, the funding, which derives from testing, differs between neighborhood to neighborhood, from state to state, and with that, resources and access. So do our students, in order to make their dreams come true, do our students have the resources and the access do they need? For my students is, do they have food when they go home? Do they have a space where they can go outdoors and create and garden and imagine and play outside that's safe? Do they have brand new books that they can experience for the first time? Do my students have gym equipment that's safe to use and that they can use both at school and at home? Do they have access to a library? All of these things are all tied together for the realities that we're seeing today in our classrooms. So about a week ago, I asked my students what their dreams for education were, keeping in mind all of the realities that we as the adults in the room know are happening within our school walls and outside of our school walls. It's still good to re-interview our students and to ask them every day what their hopes for school are. So I asked my students their dreams. What would their dream at school be? What would it look like? What would it sound like? And what would they do? And if that dream were to come true, if the answer was yes. So of course we had the students, pizza party every day, or one student said they want Roblox gift cards from the principal every Friday. But here are a few that really stood out to me. So one student whose work is shown is new to the country, and her dream is to be an artist. So immediately when I see this, right, I want to teach art, I want to be known as an artist. What do I have access to? What resources do I have to make sure that she's seen as an artist, at least, at the very least, in my classroom, if not in the school or in our community? What can I help provide her with? How can I structure my curriculum and my teaching so that she feels like an artist every time she walks into my room? Two other students said that their dream at school is to have science every single day. I have a student, if you can see that image of her, she drew a diagram of herself as a scientist conducting an experiment. And with that, she says that she would want school to look clean and healthy. And as I looked deeper into that, I thought it was very interesting because before COVID, I'm not sure healthy would have been a response she would have given for that. Which leads to the last student sample here, is that their dream is that COVID would be over. And if you look at the images, there would be no masks, no viruses, and we would actually be able to see each other smile, which is something that we took a lot for granted prior to the pandemic, is the emotion that we are seeing or not seeing because of our current realities. So thinking about all of this in mind, I reflected on what my dream for education is and for students, especially in this first year of teaching that I am going through. And ultimately, my dream is for education to turn imagination into reality. And I think that the best learning happens when classrooms and communities become places where students and teachers are not defined by age or degrees held. Instead, classrooms are bursting with co-learning and creativity. We want our students to someday become engineers, teachers, doctors, artists. Let's put in the work now to elevate their dreams with the resources that we do have in front of us. Again, thinking about our capacities as well, as educators too, and students. So in reflecting through all of that, I thought long about, well, if my students and I were to come up with one dream together, what would that be? And although dreams do look differently based on our needs, one thing that my students and I have in common is the dream to create, to be curious, and to collaborate every day in our classroom. And that's something that I try my best to do and have my students experience every day. So what does this all mean in the end? What can we do today to make dreams come true? And so having my experiences as a student teacher and now as a classroom teacher by myself, I thought about it in three different contexts. And the first is allowing space for collaboration. When children lead, we learn. When we allow students to have a safe space where they can voice their needs and their desires for their education, we know that students teach us more than we could ever teach them. Um, Children are very capable, and that is what we need to keep at the forefront prior to any curriculum that we teach. The next is actively listening and to be responsive to the needs of our students and their families and the community as a whole and our own needs as educators. Something that we have a saying a lot in the College of Education at Butler is emotion drives attention, drives learning. When I think back to the tree project I did with my first graders, they were emotionally invested in outdoors and the nature around them and what makes Indiana, Indiana. Why does Indiana look so pretty in the fall? They were emotionally invested in that idea, which drove high attention and participation from every single student, no matter if they were in person or virtual, like how I was. They wanted to learn more because they were emotionally attached to the topic. And ultimately, that drives learning. That is going to stick with them. The more emotionally invested and attentive the students are to the lesson, the more that they're going to want to become lifelong learners in the end. And the last is community. I feel like that sometimes in the United States, we have, especially with the pandemic and social distancing and testing, a lot of the times we can feel very isolated and individualistic, and that everything we do. But when we think about all of the cultures that are embedded within one single classroom, let alone an entire school, most of our cultures are very communal based. And we rely on one another to keep going. And so to have that feeling within our classrooms is necessary to have students know that their voices are being heard. Whether that is if students, are interested in how schools run, inviting the lunch personnel and staff into our classrooms to tell us how they are superheroes in our school and how they help keep our school healthy and safe. Inviting abuelas and tias into, to virtually speak in our classroom to talk about, traditions of the different cultures that our schools host. Or talking about the wider neighborhoods in our schools and our communities and inviting in a post office worker, for example, to tell us how they keep our neighborhoods running. Whatever it is that your students have interest in, grab a hold of that and run with it because that is ultimately how learning will stick. But we also, if you don't want to listen to me, listen to the experts. So I have pulled a few quotes here from Dr. King, Soretta Hammond, Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings, and Lori Malaguzzi, who all share the common idea that education and the purpose of education ultimately is to teach students how to learn. And that ultimately comes from listening to the needs of students. What do students need? What are they curious about? What do they want to collaborate with you on? Because in the end, again, students will teach you more than I think we can ever teach them. And so one quote that I want to focus in on is this quote in yellow here that says, "Learning and teaching should not stand on opposite banks and just watch the river flow by. Instead, they should embark together on a journey down the water. Through an active reciprocal exchange, teaching can strengthen learning and how to learn." And so I always keep that in the back of my mind, right? How can teaching in the classroom and school settings be reciprocal exchanges of teaching, that the students are teaching me just as much as I am to them? So thank you for taking the time today to listen to my presentation. If you would like to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, it's MissGuayaso1. And thank you so much again, Keep Indiana Learning, for inviting me to speak today.
Oh, Julissa, thank you so, so much. I'm sitting here looking at the comments which I don't know if you've had a chance to see yet, but people are appreciative of you highlighting student genius and agency and thinking about community and focusing on student inquiry. And the beautiful thing about that is that we are all students. We all need to approach our work as educators with an inquiry stance and keeping in mind all of the people we are teaching and their needs. And you did an amazing job at highlighting this. Thank you. On behalf of the Keep Indiana Learning Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Tactic Team, a big thank you to our viewers for being here to dream with us. Do not forget to join us for our roundtable discussion this afternoon with our presenters at 2 p.m. and share these sessions using the event hashtag DreamWith. Educators, there's a link in the description of the live stream to share thoughts about the Dream Summit and receive your very, very important PGP points for joining us. Thanks again, Julissa, and have a great afternoon.